In this video, we're going to build and paint the Ork Battlewagon. Now we're going to make it modular so you can build it up as any of these combinations. And how do you do that? With magnets, of course, and using our collective Ork Mech ingenuity. For the build, you want a good pair of hobby clippers, a modeling knife, and plastic glue. You can use either this watery kind or this from Citadel. Now the first thing you'll want to do is build up the body of the vehicle. This is going to be used for the Battlewagon, the Bone Crusher, or the Gunwagon. Any of them are going to use the same body. I will not be covering the step-by-step on how it is built. The instructions are very visual and easy to follow, so go ahead and build it up until you get to this stage of the build. And then after that, we will slow down a little bit, and then we'll go through the magnetizing of the various parts. You will have 3 gun choices for the Gunwagon turret. So in order to do this, you'll want to build up all 3 guns in its entirety like this, but do not stick it onto the turret. For the turret, go ahead and build it up, but do not attach the top. Leave this removable like this. Now we're going to magnetize these gun mounts, and in order to do that, you will want to remove these little nibs on all 3 guns. Go ahead and use your hobby clippers and just snip them off. After that, you'll want to use a hobby knife and then clean it off so that it's nice and flat. This will allow the super glue to work better on it. Now over here, there's a raised edge on the gun mounts. Go ahead and carefully pare these off with your knife, like I'm showing here, just to make it nice and flat and get rid of some of the material thickness there. For magnetizing these mounts, I'm going to be using 1x4mm round magnets such as these. They are small, very powerful magnets that you can find on Amazon. And since they're steel, you'll want to use super glue. Apply some super glue onto the gun mount and then slide the magnet on like this. Use a non-ferrous material such as toothpicks so that you can move them in place and press them until they stick. Next, you will be using very thin sheets of steel that you can make out of dollar store baking pans. I will include something on the upper right hand corner. And you will use some sheet metal shears to cut them into small pieces. You will need 6 of them around this size. These pieces sometimes come out pretty wavy. You can make them flat by just squeezing them with a regular pair of pliers. Now apply super glue to the areas where you had snipped off the nibs and then slide the piece of steel onto this area and allow it to set. You will do this with all 3 guns. Now using plastic glue, attach the gun mounts into the turret itself. One of the reasons for not attaching the top is that one of the guns is extremely big and it can only go in from the top like this. So making the top removable allows all 3 guns to be attached and detached fairly easily. Next, build up all the turret options, including this guy with the big shooter, the grot with the turret, the grab-a-claw, this lobba, also the sight gunners, and then the death roller. During the build process, if you come across any gun barrels, you can easily just drill them with a hobby drill. Just go ahead and drill a 2 to 3mm deep hole and it will make it look like a gun muzzle. For the front plow piece of the vehicle, you do not want to glue it onto these attachments. You'll want to leave it loose. What you'll want to do is glue the plow pieces together with plastic glue. This will give it a very nice, strong, permanent bond. It's the same thing with the death roller. You do not want to attach it onto the vehicle, but you do want to use plastic glue between the arms and the death roller itself. You'll want to loosely assemble it like this so that you get the correct spacing, and then once it's set, you can pull them apart. This will give you the option of either putting on the plow or the death roller in front of the vehicle. Next, we'll want to magnetize the turret pieces because, well, there you go. You will be attaching the sheet of metal onto the turret pieces and then magnets into these holes right here. Since they're empty, you'll want to use spare pieces of sprue like this. Press them into the hole and make them fit about 2mm deep and then set them with plastic glue. Next, use 10x2mm round magnets and super glue them onto the sprues that you had just attached. Slide them in place, allow them to set, and now they should be ready. For the turret pieces, use the same sheets of metal that I had used earlier from dollar store baking pans. Cut them to size so they fit within the little pockets of the turrets. Flatten them out if you need to. Apply super glue and then slide them in place and allow those to set. Once they're ready, you can test them out. These should have a nice strong hold. Using the same method, apply another magnet onto the other hole, and then after that, just apply sheet metal onto all the rest of the turrets. And at this point, you should be able to put a battle wagon together, such as this. Onward to the next two variants. This has a rooftop piece like this. You can take advantage of these leftover sprue bits inside the holes. Just smooth them out a little bit and then apply the magnet with super glue right on top of it like this. If there's leftover sprue bits on the back, just snip it off. And now when you put the top on, you already have a magnetized piece in place. Now if you put the Bonebreaka version of this vehicle together, put the death roller in front and then put the turrets on the 3 locations that we just created. For the Gunwagon turret, you are going to need another piece that goes on top of the roof. We will not be magnetizing this area, so go ahead and remove this sprue runner. Now, in order to make this stable on top of the roof, we'll want to magnetize this area right here. Cut off another piece of sprue like this, and then plastic glue it in this corner right here. All we need to do is apply a piece of sheet steel in this area like before, and that will allow these 2 pieces to attach together. The gun turret also has a turret mount. You want to do the same thing as before, put a piece of sprue in there and then apply the magnet onto it. Now to test out the gun wagon, go ahead and put all the pieces on, all the turrets, and then the 2 new roof pieces right here and the big gun turret right on top. At this point, all the magnetizing is done and now we're ready to paint. I'm going to paint this kit as Goff Black. So to do this, I'm going to be using this black primer from Pro Acryl, which is a very good primer. Paint it in black, and what you want to do is cover all the pieces as thoroughly as possible. You'll want this thing black. So apply it onto all the pieces, the roof pieces, the turret, the claw, the vehicle itself, everything. Next, as a time saver technique, I really don't like putting on silver with a brush. So what I'm going to do is airbrush it on with 50% gunmetal with 50% flow improver. Mix the 2 together real good and then put it into your airbrush. I applied the silver onto all the suspension pieces and also onto the tracked portions at the rear of the vehicle. Now you can apply this onto the wheels as well as anything silver, any weapons, parts of the claw, the big shooters, and also on the death roller. To make it look nice and menacing, paint the entire thing silver. Now all the gun barrels, like for the Waaagh and then the other 3 Gunwagon barrels, go ahead and paint those silver as well. Now with airbrushing, there's sometimes overspray like this. To correct for this, I use Army Painter Matte Black and I just paint over areas that I had oversprayed. It is actually easier to go back and correct overspray than to use a standard brush and try to put on silver. Putting on silver takes a lot of time, so I'd rather correct instead. Next, I'm going to use uniform gray and a large makeup brush like this to dry brush onto all the black areas. Test to make sure there's not too much gray on the brush, and then after that, just dry brush onto all the black areas. This gives the model a little bit more definition because the black primer by itself tends to absorb a lot of light. So you want to give it a standard general highlight on anything that's black, which is almost the whole vehicle. Next, I use matte white, and with either a small makeup brush or a standard brush, I am going to apply this white onto all the exposed skin areas of the Orks and Gretchen. This is in preparation of the Army Painter Speed Paints that I will be using shortly. I also apply this white with a standard brush onto random panels, not too many. I just pick a few in the vehicle that I want to be either white or red. I go ahead and paint these white, and some of them I will leave white, and others I'm going to be putting Army Painter Red Speed Paint on. For the skin of the Orks and Gretchens, I would use no other than Ork Skin Speed Paint from Army Painter. This goes very easily onto the white surfaces that I had just painted earlier. Apply them to any exposed skin of the Gretchen or the Orks as you come across them on all the models. Next, I use blood red speed paint and I apply this onto a select few panels that I had painted white earlier. Since this is a Goff Klan vehicle, they are not very flashy and don't use red very much, so I use it sparingly. Along the way, if you notice that you had missed a few parts that are supposed to have been silver, go ahead and use gunmetal, and using just a regular brush, apply gunmetal onto these features. A few examples would be the handles on the doors such as this, or the helmets on the orcs, grab handles, and so on. Next, for the tires, and for this I like to use Dark Stone by Army Painter. This is a really good color to put on tires. It makes them look like the real thing, and it goes on very easily. It's very thick. You only really need to apply one coat. Next, I use leather brown acrylic paint and I apply this onto any area that has leather straps or leather hats and so on. I just look around the models, and whenever I see anything that looks like leather, I go ahead and put this brown on it. Next, I'm going to use Freehand to add checkering onto some of the white panels I had painted earlier. What you'll want to do here is paint a square. Paint a bunch of them in one row equally spaced apart, and then when you move on to the next row, connect the edges of two of the squares across, and then after that, freehand out the shape of the square and then fill it in with black. You will do this one row at a time, and you just continue going until you've filled up all the way to the top of the panel. I applied this checkering to only about 2 or 3 panels on the entire vehicle. For some of the other white panels, I applied simple stripes like this. It can be diagonal stripes, like I'm showing right here, and then I also applied other patterns, such as this black and white triangular pattern, just to give some variety to the model. On one of the panels, I drew this waving flame pattern. To do this, you'll want to draw a fairly long S shape, and then towards the middle of the S, make it a little bit broader gradually as you get to the base. And this is what gives the pattern its flame-like appearance. Next, using a very old and frayed brush, dry brush some silver onto random edges on the model, just to make it look like the paint is chipping or wearing out. Concentrate on the edges and on the seam lines, and at the same time keep it fairly random pattern. Don't make it look like it's uniform. As you know, when anything wears in real life, it tends to wear very randomly. So paint randomly to make it look realistic. Next is one of my favorite effects for orcs, rust. And for this, I'm going to use Dry Rust by Army Painter. Using the same frayed brush that I used before, you'll want to dry brush this rust inside of the weathering effects that you laid down earlier, and you can also place it on the wheels and the threads, and then also anything silver. For instance, helmets or gun barrels, anything that's silver should have a little bit of rust on it. I mean, hey, these guys are orcs. They like a good crumping, but they're not exactly really big on maintenance. So there you go. Make it look a little bit grimy. Next, I use leftover matte white and I paint the teeth of all the orcs and Gretchen just to make them look nice and white. After that, I switch to strong tone and I apply this into any area that needs definition, such as anything that's silver and also between the teeth, so that it gives it a little bit more contrast. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and apply it also to the tires or to anything silver, because silver tends to look really flat without any washes on them. So I apply washes in those areas. Also apply this wash to any area with leather brown. Brown is another color that looks really flat without washes, so be sure to wash them. Next, I use Void Shield Blue on anything that is glass, for instance the monocle on this orc, or the glasses on this Gretchen, and the periscope lenses on the hatches. I also apply some of this blue onto the cables of the death roller to give it a little bit of contrast and a point of interest. Next, I use pure red acrylic paint and I apply this into the eye sockets of all the orcs and the Gretchen. You'll want to do this with a pointed tip, fairly small detailing brush that is ideal for jobs like these. I also apply this red paint onto the other set of cables on the death roller. The last acrylic color that I'm going to use is demonic yellow, and I put this on some of the raised iconography all over the vehicle. You can see here the various locations that I put it on. Basically anything that is not red or white, I make it yellow. Onward to the last step, decals. So I want to choose the decals from these two sets right up here. These will fit my Goff Klan the best. I use the ones that I show on the table here. I dip these decals in water for about 3 to 5 seconds, and I work on only about 5 maximum at a time. Next, I'm going to use microset, which I will place on the surface that I want to put the decal. Then, very carefully, with either my finger or my brush, I transfer the decal on and then move it into position with the brush. I continue the same process with basically all the decals. There are no hard and fast rules on how many decals and where the decals need to be placed. These guys are orcs after all, so just put them wherever you think is aesthetically pleasing, and when in doubt, don't overdo it. These small decals with the orc glyphs on them actually work really well like tank markings on a real tank. I place these randomly all around the vehicle and onto the various loose pieces as well. Protect all your work by applying 2 layers of matte varnish on everything. And now your fully magnetized and modularized Battlewagon / Gunwagon / Bonebreaka is now complete. You now have an awesome and versatile vehicle that you can use in any battle. Thank you for joining me in this mad orc mech experiment. Happy hobbying, and I'll see you in the next video.